Way too early 2025 predictions, Jordan. We're going to get into it right now. As we talked about in the top of the show, curtain call on the 2024 season. Ohio State is your national champions for 2024. So now it's time to fully embrace the offseason and everything that comes with it. And all around college football, people love to do early predictions on the upcoming season. And we're going to do these even before we talk about spring practice or that stuff even really gets rolling. So way too early 2025 predictions. We're going to talk about a lot of different things in this segment. Scrolling across the bottom, we're going to start, Jordan, with Cade Klubnik's Heisman odds. He's sitting at plus 1,200, third best odds. He's tied with Drew Aller, Nico. I'm not even going to try to say his last name, from Tennessee. And Jeremiah Smith from Ohio State, freshman wide receiver. They are right under Garrett Nussmeier and Arch Manning, who are tied as co-favorites at plus 850. So thoughts on Cade Klubnik's Heisman odds heading into 2025 season?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a while since Clemson has had a legitimate preseason, contender for the Heisman at quarterback. It's a very refreshing to see, first and foremost, and it's a reflection of what Cade was able to do this year, and a reflection of what promise this offense showed, and with everything that's coming back, odds makers seem to think, hey, that he should be in that conversation, and I can't say I disagree. So it was good to see that. Ultimately these are just odds, and obviously you can go back and probably look at last season's preseason odds and see some names that, in retrospect, you're like, okay, what were they doing there? So, these things, it's always hard with these preseason awards. But hey, look, I think Cade is as good a bet as anybody. Just with the potential he has on offense, the weapons, the continuity that he'll have at coordinator, and at receiver and on the offensive line. I mean, that's the recipe for a really strong statistical year. And when you're a quarterback, your strong statistical seasons are going to put you in that conversation, because it is Heisman. The Heisman has always been skewed towards the quarterback position. So I think it's a worthy ranking. I know some of the other names around him are interesting. Arch Manning has not, started a full season at quarterback before, and he's in the Heisman odds. But hey, he's uber talented, and he's at Texas and in a Steve Sarkisian offense, so he's going to be in that conversation.
And his last name is Manning.
So yeah, and his last name is Manning. That's another big part of that equation. And then but I do Garrett Nussmeier is obviously one of the top returning quarterbacks. Had a strong statistical year this past year. And LSU cleaned up in the transfer portal, so they're going to be a potential. And obviously you're open with them this year, so that'll be fun. But they're going to be in that conversation as well. So along with Drew Aller, who was just coming off a playoff appearance and all of that. So I think Cade is going to be one of those early front runners, and we'll see whether or not he can, take that step and deliver on that promise. So.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's going to be super interesting. It speaks to the kind of season that Cade Klubnik had in 2024, right? The fact that he is in the conversation and tied for third with some very good players in Drew Aller, Nico, and Jeremiah Smith. Obviously, Garrett Nussmeier, LSU quarterback, going to be going head-to-head with Cade Klubnik. First game of the season. We'll get into that in a little bit. But I think plus 1,200 odds, being the third best odds behind those two guys, pretty good. So, Jordan, I don't think we'll predict whether he'll win the Heisman. But let's go, will he end up in New York? Early, way too early, 2025 Heisman prediction. Will Cade Klubnik end up in New York?
In this way too early prediction, that y'all better not hold it against me or anything if it ends up wrong. 9 months, 10 months from now? I'll say yes, because I do think there aren't, as it stands right now, I don't think there are a lot of quarterbacks with his level of production coming back. And
Yeah.
I think when you are a quarterback, that award is going to be skewed in your favor a lot of the time. And with like I said, with everything he has coming back offensively, I think he'll definitely be in that conversation. So I'll say yes.
I'm with you, Jordan.
This far out.
I'm with you. Way too early. 2025 prediction. Absolutely. Cade Klubnik ultimately ends up in New York for the Heisman Trophy ceremony. Of course, we know he will not win it because he is a Clemson quarterback. Just ask Deshaun Watson and Trevor Lawrence.
Yeah. Very true.
All right, next thing we're going to talk about Clemson's national championship odds, as it sits right now today, are at plus 1,800. Good for 9th overall, right behind Tennessee, and right in front of LSU, who is 10th on the list. So, Jordan, what do you think about those national championship odds for our Tigers heading into this next season?
I mean, it sounds about right. I think Clemson is. I'll say this: we've talked about what we think about so far, what we think about this team in 2025, and we think they have the opportunity to be, pretty damn good, better, considerably better than this past year, even with a playoff appearance. And so, like, I think they're going to be right in that conversation to potentially be a top 4 seed and maybe make a run at it. So I like their odds. You could probably get some pretty good value with where they're sitting. So I think that makes a lot of sense. As South Carolina chokes a game against Florida and Clemson wins, man, what a night! This is a good night.
What a great night, man! You know what I'm saying? Clemson gets the dub against Syracuse. South Carolina, in true South Carolina fashion, loses. So it's shaping up. There's snow on the ground outside, Jordan. We're doing way too early 2025 predictions. I mean, how could the show go any better?
Yeah, absolutely. It's great. I didn't even get to hate watch that whole game because they were playing at the same time. But I watched the end. Florida got a game-winning layup, so it sucks to suck. Anyway, this is not a basketball show. I just wanted to point that out.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. So, I mean, 9th seems about right. You look at the list of teams that are kind of on there. I think Ohio State is actually the favorite to win the national title yet again in 2025, followed by Texas, Oregon, Georgia, Penn State, Notre Dame, Alabama, Tennessee, then our Clemson Tigers. So, and then LSU right behind them. We'll get to that game in a minute. But it seems right. It seems we're in the mix, which is something that you have not been able to say entering any season the past 4 years. So it's good to be back in the mix of being a legitimate contender when it comes to national championship discussions. Whether Clemson makes it or not, we're going to find out in a moment, Jordan. Will the Clemson Tigers play for the 2025 College Football National Championship? Way too early prediction.
Way too early predictions. Will they play for the national championship? I'm going to say no. But I think they can. I would not. It's not an easy no. I think this team has the players capable, especially with what I saw this year. I didn't think there was a truly there wasn't really a team that truly separated from the rest of the pack. Ohio State played their best football at the end of the year. That's for sure.
Yeah, they got hot.
I didn't think they were just like miles better than everybody else. And even when it seemed like they were going to run away with Notre Dame, they didn't. They played really good football. They're going to lose a lot of that team. I don't see anybody else in the sport that is, that has, this is a no-brainer. They're going to be they're going to be the team to beat next year. There just doesn't seem to be that. Texas is bringing back a lot of talent offensively. Well, they're bringing back a lot of good players, but they're starting a new quarterback. Obviously, that can change. Penn State, Oregon, like all of these teams have major questions, and so I think Clemson is right could be right there with any of those teams potentially, especially if you get what you hope you get out of the defense that you didn't get this past season.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the key right there, right, Jordan, is what is this defense going to look like in 2025 for the Clemson Tigers? Obviously, we've talked in length about Tom Allen and how excited we are to have him on as our new defensive coordinator and for him to really be able to turn around the defense from a production standpoint from what was produced in 2024 on the field. But I'm going to go with no, Clemson will not play for the national championship in 2025. But again, like you, I think there is a legitimate possibility that if things work out, and we obviously you need some luck, and by luck I mean you need health, right? Because people just like the depth in college football isn't what it used to be because of because of NIL and the transfer portal, right? Everybody every single year's 2 and 3 deeps get rated. And Clemson's not immune to that at all, which is why you see teams like Georgia this past year. That was a very good team, but when they have injuries and things happen, they don't quite have the depth that they used to have, right? Same with Alabama and all the other top teams. You mentioned Ohio State this past season. Obviously, that Michigan loss, I think, was very pivotal in their run in the college football playoff. I think it was kind of a wake-up call to those guys. And really propelled them through the rest of their season into the college football playoff and ultimately winning a national championship. But to your point, I don't think they were head and shoulders above the rest of college football. Yeah, it may have seemed that way towards the end, how they started playing. But you mentioned Notre Dame didn't go away in that game. They didn't quit. They kept battling back and essentially, couldn't produce very much on offense, which was ultimately their downfall. That and trying to play man against that wide receiver core of Ohio State, which we all knew probably wasn't going to work out too well, and we were correct. But, yeah, I think Clemson will have a legitimate shot to make a deep playoff run. But I'm not ready to say that they will play for the College Football National Championship in 2025. So I'm going to go no there, just like you. Next point of topic is – after finishing the season 10-4 this past year, we saw the improvement in the offense. The defense kind of declined as the season went, didn't produce as well as we would have liked. But the over-under win total for the Tigers is set at 9.5, with the over at plus 126 and the under at minus 162. So 9.5, the over under win total. What are your thoughts on that for the 2025 version of the Clemson Tigers?
You're getting plus money for the over as it stands right now. I like those odds. I do think with Clemson's schedule, it does shape up to potentially be kind of tricky. Some of the games that you have, and we'll see when the schedule is released what the order looks like. Obviously, you're opening with LSU, closing with South Carolina. Yeah. But everything in between that is very much up in the air as far as what the scheduling and your bye weeks are going to look like. So that's one thing that I'm really interested to see. But I do think this team should be the team to beat. Should be the clear favorite in the ACC. I think with everything they bring back, Miami had a really strong year this past year, but they're replacing a Heisman finalist at quarterback. And as good as Carson Beck has been at times, that's not a sure thing. They have a lot of questions on defense. They have they are basically overhauling their secondary in the transfer portal. They have a couple of really good receivers that they have to replace, and Isaiah Horton and Xavier Restrepo. Horton went to the transfer portal, and obviously Restrepo is going to the NFL. And I don't think SMU obviously is returning a good team, but hey, Clemson won the ACC. I think they bring back a lot. Like I said, they bring back a lot of talent. I think they should be the clear favorite. I think 10 regular season wins at least is very much on the table for this team, and if not 11, 12. So I think that's, for me as it stands right now, I think it's a good opportunity to bet the over, because I think those odds might change a little bit.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, look, essentially, Clemson is returning 8 starters on offense and 8 starters on defense. We only lost 3 off of the D, 3 off of the offense and defense, 3 per side, right? So I think the talent, the experience that you're bringing back, there's something to be said about that. And with the improvement on the offensive side of the ball and what we anticipate Tom Allen being able to do with the talent that's currently on Clemson's defensive roster, I see your ACC schedule going very well for the Tigers this next year. So you went 7-1 in the conference this past season. I don't see you doing any worse in the conference in 2025. Frankly, I could see Clemson going undefeated in the conference if the schedule shakes out in a good way, and if again things come together and barring injury to any sort of major key players for the Tigers, I could definitely see them going undefeated in the conference in 2025. So I like the over. I think a 10-win season should be the bare minimum for this Clemson team heading into 2025. So I would definitely, if you're a betting person in college football and that's something that you like to do, I would definitely get on those early odds for the over and get that plus money for that the over the 9.5. So
Absolutely.
all right, shifting gears. Last thing we're going to give a prediction on in our way too early 2025 prediction: Clemson versus LSU. Kick off the season with another huge game. LSU, the only difference is this season, it's not a neutral site game. Thank the Lord, it's happening. It's a home and home series. LSU's coming to Death Valley, the real Death Valley. I don't care what LSU has to say about it. I know it makes you mad. I don't care. It makes you mad. But Clemson opens up as a 2.5-point favorite, according to FanDuel, and a 1.5-point favorite, according to DraftKings. So 2 different lines there. You can pick which one you want. But they're a favorite opening up against LSU at home. Now, some things to think about when you're giving a prediction, a way too early prediction on this game. We gotta pick and choose what we're gonna talk about here, right? So Clemson, LSU 5 straight opener losses, dating all the way back to 2020. Lost to Mississippi State, UCLA, lost to Florida State twice. That's embarrassing. And USC just this past year. They did lose to Florida State when Florida State was much better than they were this past season. So yeah. I will give you that, LSU fans. Calm down. And another interesting point is Clemson, like we talked about before, 9th on the national championship odds, and LSU right below them at 10th. So there is that going into the game as well. Brian Kelly, some LSU fans are going to be looking for him to kind of start turning the corner at LSU and start producing at a bit higher of a level. So we'll go with the 1.5 DraftKings. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, it's one, arguably. I mean, it's going to be one of the marquee games of Week 1. I mean, that's what's exciting. I mean, these are 2 of the biggest brands in college football, and I think you could probably Ohio State and Texas, I think, play Week 1. I think that's probably going to get the game day, the college game day, because that's just how it's going to go. But I think Clemson LSU is going to be one of the top games of a really loaded slate in Week 1. Because you also got Alabama, Florida State, which, hey, that might, who knows? two big brands, Alabama and Florida State playing. Florida State wasn't good this past year. And I can't think of the other ones, but you get what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And so this is going to be pivotal, I think, for both teams. They're both returning senior quarterbacks that are, potential Heisman candidates. Both teams are trying to, get back to playing good defense. So that's going to be interesting. LSU obviously hit the transfer portal really hard for defense and at the wide receiver position, interestingly enough. And so, it's going to be a battle of, the continuity that Clemson has as far as their roster retention versus the kind of the overhaul that LSU made with a lot of their players, a lot of their starters on offense and defense. And so it's going to be interesting. And like you said, obviously the whole Death Valley conversation is going to be, we're going to be tired of it by the time that game rolls around. So who's the real Death Valley? It was annoying leading up to the national championship game back in 2019.
Yes,
and so like, I know it's going to be even worse now that this is the first time either of these teams have played in the other's home stadium, and it's going to happen again next year. So like I'm super excited for it, and I think Clemson should be the favorite. I think the line is probably about right as it sits right now. If the game was played today, based on what I know about both teams, I would pick Clemson to win the football game. So with these way too early predictions, I'm gonna stick with that. I think Clemson wins the opener, but maybe I feel different when we do our official season predictions closer.
Yeah, look, I absolutely think Clemson wins this game. One, it's at home in Death Valley. Two, the amount of talent that Clemson's returning. We just talked about it when we talked about the over-under win total for the season. LSU has lost their past 5 openers, but Clemson's lost their last 2. So
and 3 of the last 4.
And 3 of the last 4. So you could point to that in a negative light for Clemson as well. But I just think Clemson, will ultimately get the job done against LSU. I think we're a better team. And with the return of Cade Klubnik, I know they got Garrett Nussmeier, and he's a really good quarterback. But I trust Clemson more in this game. And it's a home game. Death Valley is going to be going absolutely insane for this game. So I'll take I'll take Clemson to win the game as of right now. Now, maybe we get close to the season and we got a bunch of injuries, or things ain't looking too good, or what we're hearing out of fall camp. We'll make our real predictions then. But as far as the way too early, I'm going to take the Tigers, the Clemson Tigers, that is, over the LSU Tigers in the season opener. Now, quick fire before we move on, Jordan. We're going to go and outline a couple of these other big Week 1 games around college football. It's going to be a great Week 1 in college football.
Oh, yeah, man.
So first we'll hit Ohio State versus Texas. Ohio State opened up as a 4.5-point favorite. Who you got?
Oh, yeah. This far out, it's tough, man.
It's tough.
Both teams, and it's because both teams are starting new quarterbacks. Arch Manning for Texas and probably Julian Sayin for Ohio State.
Yeah.
So like it's like it makes it so much harder to project when you do that. Texas is. I'm interested to see kind of how they address their running back situation, because Jadon Blue declared for the NFL draft. Obviously, he tore Clemson up in the playoff game.
Yeah,
he chose to declare early. They do get C.J. Baxter back. He was hurt pretty much the entire season, and he was probably their RB1. So that'll be interesting. Kind of how they have some pieces to replace on the offensive line. Kelvin Banks, and it was obviously going to be a first rounder. Their right tackle declared as well, I think. Defensively, they're still going to have a lot of dogs. But they do have to replace some pieces in the secondary. So I think
receivers as well. off that.
Yeah.
Golden.
Yep.
Golden
Matthew
left.
Golden and I
Forget the
did
other guy.
Isaiah Bond declare? I think he did.
Yeah, Isaiah Bond declared as well. Yeah.
Yeah. So
He's gone.
that's tough.
Yeah.
I think with everything that Texas, I think Texas probably has a little bit more questions heading into this game. So this far out, I'll go with Ohio State, and just because, and also Ohio State is just they've spent the money,
Right.
and they just coming off a national championship, it's hard to bet against them right now.
It is. I'll go Texas. Actually, I'll take the 4.5 points and go Texas. Just because I think Arch Manning's probably going to be the best quarterback in the game. So
we've seen more of him.
He doesn't have a lot of playing experience, but he does have playing experience at Texas. So,
yeah.
And what
we've
you've
seen more of him than saying, that's for sure.
Right, and what you've seen of him has been really good. He's athletic. So Ohio State coming off of that, that big national championship, are they going to be as hungry in game one? Probably. They're probably going to have a brand new, roster because they're going to go out and pay a bunch of money in the transfer portal to get a bunch of good players. But I'll take 4.5. I'll take Texas. All right, next big game, Alabama, Florida State. Alabama is an 8.5 point favorite.
Yeah, not going to spend too much time Alabama. I'm surprised that the line is that short, but Florida State, they're kind of banking on Florida State not being nearly as terrible as they were. Yeah,
it's January, and Florida State has done some good in the transfer portal, like they do every single year. We'll see how the 2025 version works out for them, but yeah, I'm Alabama all day on this. I don't think it's very hard to pick that game. No. Florida State's going to get rolled. Auburn, Baylor. Auburn is a 1.5 point favorite.
Yeah, that's going to be. I don't trust Hugh Freeze. That's the thing. Like it's like Auburn should win that game.
Yeah.
I do think they have some talented pieces, and they probably should have won more games than they did last year. But
do they have their quarterback figured out?
They brought in 1 million of them.
Yeah,
and I don't know if any of them are going to be any good.
Right.
So it's like,
is it going to work out? Are they going to? Is it even going to be settled by game one? Right. So I don't know.
Good question. So I'll lean Auburn, but I don't feel good. I'm
still going to go Auburn, but yeah, to your point, I don't trust Hugh Freeze at all. But Auburn 1.5 point favorite. I'll take them. Georgia Tech at Colorado. This could be a cool game to watch. Georgia Tech opens up at a 4.5 point favorite. No Shedeur Sanders. Deion is presumably going to be there. No Travis Hunter. No Shiloh. Going to be a completely different roster, as it is every single year in Colorado. So nothing new there. Who you got?
Yeah, I'm going to go with Georgia Tech. I think they have the better roster. They did better in the portal. But Colorado's interesting because they are bringing in Julian Lewis, and that that could, if he comes out and plays well out the gate. I mean, it's hard to ask a true freshman to do that, but that could be interesting. But I'll go with Georgia Tech because I just think they're a little bit more. They've built a little bit more continuity in their roster, and I don't. Deion, with how he goes about doing things, it feels like that program is going to be a year-to-year thing. Like they could have a strong year like this year, and then they could also fall back down. And it just depends on whether or not their portal takes hit and all that. So
kind of feels like Florida State, right?
Yeah.
Kind of similar with those two. So yeah, Georgia Tech's just more consistent, and they've done some really good things in the portal. And they're trending in the right direction. They're getting better each and every year. So I'll take them over Colorado easy. Tennessee versus Syracuse in Atlanta. Tennessee opens up as a 13.5 point favorite.
Yeah, I'm going Tennessee. No Kyle McCord. Syracuse was fun last year, but I think there's going to be a return to
Yeah,
a
there's
reality a
going
little
to
bit.
be regression in 2025 for Syracuse
Yeah,
for sure.
and with Nico being in his third season, I think he's going to take I think he's going to take a step forward. You know, I do have questions about their receivers and kind of the Josh Heupel offense when they can't protect is pretty awful. You know, it's pretty tough to watch at times, and receivers that they can't catch. So if they address that, then you know they could be a lot better this year.
Yeah.
But you know they got to put the pieces around Nico. But I think they have the defense is going to be able to, you know, or especially early on, I think the defense will be able to carry them a bit. So,
Yeah, Tennessee for sure on that one.
Yeah.
No doubt about it. Notre Dame at Miami. That's a cool game. Notre Dame opens up as a 2.5-point favorite over the Miami Hurricanes. Carson Beck led Miami.
Yeah, that's going to be
That still
weird.
sounds weird.
It is. You know what? I'm going to go with Miami. Actually,
Hey.
I'm going to take Miami. Notre Dame is interesting because they're actually going to bring a lot of pieces back. But you know, they're probably going to be starting the true freshman that they're bringing in, or the true freshman that they're bringing in this year, and CJ Carr.
Yeah.
I would bet would be the starter next year. Obviously, we don't know. And you know, Carson Beck, he does have experience. They do have a really good offensive line, and I think that'll be enough to.
He's going to have weapons.
Yeah.
They're going to have weapons for him. So, yeah, I think Miami will get the job done there as well. South Carolina versus Virginia Tech to wrap it up. South Carolina opens up as a 9.5-point favorite.
Man, South Carolina is a team that, you know, bias aside, obviously, they are interesting because they are losing so much off that defense, but because Lenore Sellers, you know, the promise that he showed this year, like I have a lot of questions, but he made a lot of things work for them, especially late in the year. Even when they really didn't have much. Like they brought in a ton of receivers in their recruiting class. I don't know if any of them are going to be any good out of the gate, but they brought in some additional bodies there. You know, Nick Harbor's coming back. He actually led the team in receiving yards with like 370 yards. So that tells you kind of what their passing game was this year. But they lose so much off the defense. Like that's the thing that is. I don't want to say scares because like I don't want South Carolina to be good. But like if I was a South Carolina fan, that would be the thing that would concern me is defensively. Are they going to be anywhere near what they were this year? You know, you do bring back Dylan Stewart, but you're losing both. You know, like three, 4 players off your 2 deep at defensive tackle. You lose Kyle Kennard, your leading sack leader. You're losing basically your entire linebacker group. You're losing 2 corners. Like it's. I'm sorry, not 2 corners. You lose one of your safeties and one of your corners, and O'Donnell Fortune and Nick Emmanwori. So like they have a lot to replace up front. And and a couple of pieces in the secondary that were really, really good for them. So like Virginia Tech, but the thing with Virginia Tech is I don't know what to think of them either. So it's and we've seen South Carolina in these openers kind of look really pedestrian. I'm going to take South Carolina to win because Lenore Sellers is a game breaker, and I don't think Virginia Tech has a guy like that. But like that could end up being a game that is really, really competitive just because they don't seem to come out with a lot of fire. It was kind of like how they played against Old Dominion this past year.
Right. Well, I was about to say, you look at that Old Dominion game, they came very close to losing that game.
Yeah. I don't know. That could be interesting. I really don't know what to think about South Carolina this year because how much of what that was they were a really old team. Like that's what people don't realize is they had a ton. They had a first year starting quarterback, but the rest of that team was extremely experienced. They had to replace pieces off the offensive line too. Like they lost. They're losing a lot. So it's like
They are
I
losing a
don't know
lot,
how much
and
of that was experience and how much of that
they
is something
weren't
that translates.
particularly great at wide receiver this past year. They brought in a bunch of dudes
Yeah.
this season. Do any of those pan out? Are Lenore Sellers' weapons going to be any better than they were a year ago? Because if not, I don't think they're going to be able to replicate the same success they had in 2024 and
Oh,
2025.
and that's not even mentioning running back.
Running
You
back,
lose
yeah,
Rocket Sanders, and
yeah,
like I don't look at their running back room right now and say like, oh, there's a guy that scares me. Like they have I think they have a couple of nice guys, like okay
yeah,
players, but like they don't have Rocket Sanders' production is not going to be replaced. I don't think. So
yeah.
it's Lenoris is probably going to have to carry a little bit more of the load in the running game than he already did.
Yeah, a lot of question marks for both of those teams. So
Yeah.
really hard to kind of predict this game in January. It, if I'm doing the smart bet, I'll probably pick South Carolina just because they're more talented than Virginia Tech.
Yeah.
But I could see South Carolina dropping a game like this in an opener. So, but I'll go with South Carolina.
Yeah.